Welcome to the Language Stories podcast, where I include extra stories about the history of languages. Before we start, I want to remind you to press subscribe and click on the bell to get notified when a new video is released. In this episode, we'll start once again with the story of Hangul and continue with the stories behind the Greek letters, Cyrillic script, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and the Japanese writing systems. Have you ever made up your own language? Or your own writing system? Nowadays, children and grown-ups make up writing systems for fun or for a secret code. But this story is about a 15th century king who dared to make an easy writing system against opposition from nobles in the powerful neighboring empire. King Sejong was nearing the 25th year of his reign over Korea, then known as the Joseon Kingdom. Sejong had presided over Joseon's golden age, seeing advancements in science and technology, sweeping humanitarian reforms, and military success against Japanese invaders. One of his many reforms was a petition system, where the Joseon people could write petitions to the king. However, this remained inaccessible to the peasant class. This was because, at this time, Koreans only had classical Chinese as a formal writing system. The ruling class took advantage of this, and learning the Chinese characters became a symbol of power and privilege. In addition, the Ming dynasty had just come to power in China at the time, which changed the pronunciation of Chinese characters and made it even harder for Koreans to learn the new standard pronunciation to record their words. King Sejong wanted to remove this injustice, so Sejong worked on his alphabet project in secret, likely with the help of his children and his loyal staff. When Sejong finished his alphabet, he tried to maintain secrecy by asking a few young scholars to help translate classical Buddhist and Confucian books into these letters. However, they were soon found out by the greater young man society. Immediately, there was an outcry. How could you make a new alphabet, they said. You're rebelling against the Confucian order, threatening conflict against China, and erasing our culture. But Sejong was prepared. He responded saying, these new characters can capture our native sounds. In fact, they can even be used to teach Chinese characters more efficiently. They will allow people to voice their grievances and petitions to the government. Isn't the communication between the ruler and his people what our Confucian government and culture depends on? Despite the opposition, Sejong not only had the translations published, but released a guide to his new characters to his people. He claimed a wise man can acquaint himself with them before the morning is over, and a stupid man can learn them in the space of 10 days. And he was right. These letters quickly spread throughout the nation, and soon enough everyone could read works written with this alphabet. As expected, despite Sejong's new invention, Chinese characters remained the text of the elite. However, Sejong's alphabet persisted and is now known as Hangul. Thanks to Sejong, generations of Koreans and people around the world have learned to read and write Hangul. Every year, Koreans celebrate Sejong's achievement on October 9th, the anniversary of the alphabet's publication. Moreover, Sejong is remembered fondly as the Great King Sejong, and a bronze statue of Sejong the Great currently sits at Gwanghwamun Plaza in Seoul, Korea. Cadmus and the Greek alphabet. Many of us are familiar with the Greek alphabet. Greek letters are used in mathematical formulas, units of measurement, scientific constants, names of secret societies, and much more. But where did these letters come from? Well, like many things Greek, the story of the Greek alphabet starts in the 9th century BC, and a Greek myth. Europa was a beautiful Phoenician princess, and while on the shores of her father's kingdom, she caught the eye of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. Enraptured by her beauty, Zeus transformed into a bull and captured the princess. Witnesses saw Europa being carried away on a bull's back, and reported this to her father, King Agenor, son of King Belus of Egypt, and Achiroi, and grandson of the river god Nilus. Worried for his daughter, Agenor sent his sons to search for Europa. One of these sons was named Cadmus, and unlike his brothers Phoenix and Cilix, who were quick to give up, Cadmus was relentless in his search for his sister. Unbeknownst to the young prince, his sister had been taken to Crete, where she had become Crete's first queen. Cadmus instead arrived at the Oracle of Delphi for counsel to inquire about Europa, but the oracle told him not to worry about his sister and instead follow a cow, and then build a city in the place where the animal should stop to rest. So, Cadmus, obeying the oracle, journeyed through Phocis, which is the region bordering the northern coast of the Gulf of Corinth, and having met a cow, followed it behind until it fell down for weariness in that same spot in Boeotia, where Cadmus founded the city of Cadmea, later known as Thebes. The Phoenicians who came with Cadmus after their settlement in Thebes then introduced the Phoenician writing system to the local Greeks. At that period, most of the Greeks in the neighborhood were Ionians. They were taught these letters by the Phoenicians and adopted them, with a few alterations, for their own use. While Greek myths are often conflicting, the Greek tradition is unanimous in naming Cadmus as the founder of Thebes and introducing a new alphabet. Cadmus is credited for having combined consonants with vowels, thus teaching the secrets of correct speech. The myths also claim that Cadmus was close with the gods, and taught the language of animals, the art of prophecy, and other things to the Greeks. Tradition also has it that the Cadmean alphabet originally consisted of 16 letters, and that 4 additional characters were introduced later, about the time of the Trojan War. Of course, the Greek alphabet is still used today in Greece, but the letters are also being used throughout the world across many disciplines. Moreover, Greek letters have also been a model for other writing systems. But that's another language story. Cyrillic, letters of the Orthodox Church. The Cyrillic alphabet is one of the oldest and one of the most widespread alphabets in the world nowadays. In my multi-language song edits, I've seen Cyrillic used for Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Turkish. For the native English speaker, Cyrillic may seem a bit misleading, but the alphabet becomes more intuitive once you learn that the letters are modeled after Greek. In the early medieval times, Slavs made attempts to write with strokes and notches, and later they tried to use Greek and Latin letters for this purpose. On the Balkan Peninsula between the 7th to 9th century AD, the Slavs lived under the rule of the Bulgarians, who had come from Asia, and at that time spoke a non-Slavic language, likely something similar to Turkish. The Bulgarians wrote their official documents in Greek, however, but then faced difficulties in writing some of their sounds with the Greek letters. Eventually, in the 9th century AD, Saint Cyril and his brother Saint Methodius invented a new script for the Slavic languages, Glagolitic script, to ease their mission from Byzantine Emperor Michael III to spread Christianity throughout Great Moravia, or the Western Slavic regions. The purpose of the new script was to accommodate the common Slavic language of the region, whose sounds could not be captured by either Greek or Latin. Glagolitic script was then improved by either St. Cyril and St. Methodius or their student Clement of Ohrid. The edited script was called Cyrillic in honor of St. Cyril. Cyrillic script first consisted of 43 letters according to historians. 24 of them were the letters of the Greek alphabet, and the other letters were for the rest of the Slavic sounds. After the deaths of Cyril and Methodius in 869 and 885 AD, respectively, the Cyrillic script came under threat in the Catholic-controlled regions. In the year 885 AD, Pope Stephen VI issued a bull to restrict spreading and reading Christian services in languages other than Latin or Greek. The ruler of Great Moravia, Svatopluk I, was allied with the Holy Roman Empire, so he persecuted the students of Cyril and Methodius. In 886, Clement and the other students fled to the First Bulgarian Empire, where they were warmly accepted by the Bulgarian Tsar Boris I of Bulgaria. Bulgaria followed the Eastern Orthodox Church based in the Byzantine Empire, so Boris I welcomed Cyrillic writing. From Bulgaria, the Old Bulgarian literary language and the Cyrillic alphabet were transferred to Russia and the Serbian principalities, where, during the 11th through 12th centuries, Old Russian and Old Serbian literatures were born. By the 14th century, Cyrillic was used by the Slavs, the Balkans, and some of the Uralic peoples. Since then, the alphabet has been tweaked in each respective culture, nation, country, and with each time period. Currently, these alphabets have 29 letters in common, while the differences accommodate the sounds of each respective language. Now that you know that Cyrillic was modeled after Greek, I hope you find letters a bit easier to read. For instance, don't confuse ura for the Latin P, because it actually represents the Greek letter rho. The division in Europe between Latin and Cyrillic writing demonstrates the religious schism of the region, but also reflects the recent Cold War history. This goes to show how an alphabet can carry a lot of political weight. Ancient writings, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So far, the three languages we have covered are phonetic languages, whose letters represent individual sounds, or phonemes. But the early Egyptian hieroglyphs are ideograms, representing concepts and words, like many of the other early ancient scripts. The ancient Egyptians believed that writing was invented by the god of wisdom Thoth, and called their hieroglyphic script Meju Netjer, words of the gods. Thoth's intention was to give wisdom and a better memory to the Egyptians. But the god Ra of the sun thought that writing would have the opposite effect, making people rely on written documents for wisdom and memory. However, Thoth still gave writing to a very restricted group, the scribes. For this reason, the Egyptian scribes honored Thoth as their patron. Scribes were highly thought of in Egyptian society, and they had to pass several years of training until they got enough knowledge and mastered writing. The houses of life, called per-ankh, normally attached to temples, worked as centers of knowledge and as schools for scribes. In these centers, books were copied, all kinds of knowledge were kept in what we would call libraries, and people were trained to become scribes, administrators, or even healers. But Thoth was not the only god venerated in the House of Life. So was Seshat, goddess of writing and scribe of the gods. As the goddess of writing, she would do all the accounting and record-keeping of the gods. She also did measures, and is patron of the libraries, librarians, and builders, and is often depicted as a wife or daughter of Thoth. But most importantly, she would receive a copy of the documents written in the House of Life, so that she would keep them eternally in the library of the gods. On the non-mythical, but rather anthropological and historical side of things, the origin of Egyptian hieroglyphs is poorly understood. It is likely that they were derived from rock pictures produced by prehistoric hunting communities living in the desert west of the Nile. The earliest known examples of writing in Egypt have been dated back to 3400 BC. Some historians believe that the hieroglyphs even predate Sumerian cuneiform, making Egyptian hieroglyphs potentially the oldest writing script in the human world. Hieroglyphs remained exclusive to the scribes and others in or above the priestly class. Priests and scribes kept the use of hieroglyphs for special purposes, such as monument inscriptions or funerary contexts. For more mundane uses, scribes quickly adopted a shorthand called hieratic around 3200 BC. An even simpler shorthand called demotic came in use around the 7th century BC, and this script was used for everything except in religious and funerary inscriptions. Sadly, hieroglyphs eventually fell out of use after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and started the Ptolemaic dynasty. Under Ptolemaic rule from 332 to 30 BC, and then the Roman period from 30 BC to 395 AD in Egypt, Greek and Roman culture became increasingly influential. Christianized Egyptians developed the Coptic alphabet, another offshoot of the Greek alphabet like Cyrillic, and the Coptic persists as the liturgical language of the Coptic Church today. Modern-day Egyptians now use and speak Arabic, so please don't ask your friends from Egypt if they speak Egyptian or write in hieroglyphs. The many writing systems of the Japanese language. Anyone who has studied or is studying Japanese will tell you that one of the most difficult parts of the language is the many writing systems. Modern Japanese uses a combination of logographic kanji, which are adopted Chinese characters, and syllabic gana. Gana is further divided into hiragana, used primarily for native or naturalized Japanese words and grammatical elements, and katakana, used primarily for foreign words and names, loan words, onomatopoeia, scientific names, and sometimes for emphasis, like italics. But why so many writing systems? Well, here's the story. Japan didn't have a writing system until it was introduced by the Chinese around 50 AD. However, most Japanese people remained illiterate until about the 5th century AD. With the import of Chinese characters in 50 AD, kanji started to be used to write Japanese words, and around 650 AD, a writing system called manyogana was invented that used Chinese characters for their sounds, opposed to their meaning, to represent Japanese. From manyogana, gana, or hiragana, was developed and used by women who were denied an education in kanji. Katakana also evolved from parts of the manyogana by Buddhist monks who wanted to simplify it even further. This was shown rather comically in episode 16 of Hetalia. There are also some theories that katakana-like annotations may have originated in 8th century Korea, possibly the Silla dynasty, and then introduced to Japan through Buddhist texts. Of course, this theory is mired with historical and current complexities of Korea-Japan relations, but it is an interesting theory that demonstrates the exchange of information between China, Korea, and Japan. Even in the 16th century, Japanese kana did not have the additional diacritical marks called handakuten and dakuten, that we see today. Japanese people just knew when a word was to be voiced and when a word would not. Back then, there was no difference between the ha, hi, fu, he, ho and pa, pi, pu, pe, po sounds. These marks were added to teach Western missionaries Japanese, and were then adopted for all writing during the Meiji Reformation. Today, hiragana is used to write Japanese words that have no kanji and words that kanji cannot be remembered for or haven't yet been learned, while katakana is used for foreign words, loanwords, often used for onomatopoeia, and used to show the difference between a Japanese reading and a Chinese reading of Chinese characters, to show emphasis, some company names, and etc. Kanji is mostly used to write nouns, adjective stems, and verb stems, and hiragana is used for particles, verb endings, and phonetic readings for words written in kanji. This system was also standardized during the Meiji period. So the Japanese kept Chinese characters in their writing, while adding in new kanji and supplementing with kana. While it's possible that Japan could simplify its writing systems even further, the country seems pretty content to continue using all three. In any case, the writing system is almost a microcosm of Japanese history of adopting foreign influences and adapting them into Japanese culture. Thank you for listening. This is the end of episode 1, Making an Alphabet of the Language Stories podcast. Check out the video version of the story of Hangul on my YouTube channel, Multilang Project. Next episode will be about the chimeric nature of the English language. Until next time, stay safe and take care, my fellow multilinguals. Bye-bye!